Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the City Commission meeting, workshop meeting for Monday, October the 9th, 2017, and ask the city clerk to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Alcantara?
Here.
Commissioner Bradford?
Present.
Commissioner Herzberg?
Here.
Commissioner Honaker?
Here.
Commissioner Ramos?
He's absent.
Vice Mayor Novick?
Here.
And Mayor Smasozik?
Here. If you'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, tonight we have two items on our workshop agenda, a discussion of different types of boards that handle appeals, variances, conditional uses, special exceptions, and our interim Assistant City Attorney Marcia is going to give us an update on these issues. I don't know, what was the original question that was asked that prompted this to be on the workshop?
Mr. Mayor, I think that it started with the whole issue of interpretations and appeals.
Appeals, okay.
And so that's kind of where it started, and then it kind of grew to looking at code provisions and looking at talking with the city manager and doing some research. And I prepared a memorandum that y'all received in August, where I kind of walked through my own experiences and what I've dealt with, and also what some other cities around the state do. There's a number of different ways to deal with it. I'm not married to any of them. I basically gave you a recommendation at the end because Jane made me, but by the same token, which you did. So anyway, But anyway, I thought we needed a little humor. But anyway, there are a number of ways to do it. I will tell you that when I got in the middle of all of this and started looking in the code, and then I have in here the number of times we reference different, code provisions over and over and over again. And it seems like over the years things were added, but then other things weren't taken away. So we kind of have a messy kind of situation in the code with regards to conditional uses, variances, any of those kinds of things. So I saw this, if the commission was interested, in a way to bring a board together that would have a number of, could handle conditional uses, could handle variances, that they wouldn't come to the commission to handle special uses, all of those kinds of things, and also appeals. So, and I also then was told that you have another board that deals with ordinances that is kind of looking for more work, and so I kind of threw that in too as a way to bring that board into this board so we wouldn't have a proliferation. But these are all just ideas that I threw out for all of you. So my plan tonight was just to answer questions, and you guys give me suggestions and basically tell me what you want me to do. Do you want me to do a draft ordinance? Do you want me to start doing that kind of code work that would be necessary to start streamlining some of the code provisions? Because they're pretty outrageous. I mean, when you talk about 95 references to a conditional use or 75 references to a variance in the code, it's not very user-friendly. I mean, you don't want to say we're open for business, but go look at 75 different code provisions to see if any one of them might apply to you. So There's code work here, quite a bit of it. I've done a lot of code work in my career. I'm not opposed to it. It can be done in-house. You could also hire, consultants to come in and totally redo the code. I would recommend that we do it piece by piece, depending on, how we have, particular sections. I didn't want to start on any of the work until you guys tell me whether I'm hired permanently or not before I start tearing your code apart. So I thought I should not try and start that. But so instead, I kind of gave you the numbers so you could see the repetitious use of some of these terms in the code that really cause a problem and cause a problem with anybody trying to interpret what's going on. So that's kind of my presentation. You've all had the memorandum. You've had plenty of time to look at it. I just really, there's many options. There's the option of us creating this kind of board that is an all-purpose kind of board. There's the option of taking your interpretations or appeals. The counties, I gave you examples where some cities have agreements with counties and they go to their contractor licensing board. The only thing in that case, then the city loses control of the process, but you have a board that you have those different disciplines. In Cocoa Beach, which I did their Board of Adjustment for 9 years, our appeals went to that board. They're a coastal city, so they had a lot of coastal issues, but their chief building officials' appeals came to that board, and even though they were lay people from the community, they did an excellent job of dealing with appeals. Both sides give their story, and then they ask questions, they have public comment, and then they make a decision. The nice part about a Board of Adjustment is once they render a decision, it's final. If somebody doesn't like it, they can go to circuit court. So that's, so these things have an ending point instead of just kind of rolling around and rolling around. And then they can go to circuit court and challenge the position of the board. But it doesn't come back to the commission. So y'all don't have to deal with some of these issues that oftentimes can just get difficult. And, I've seen boards do great jobs. Just lay people from your community, you appoint the people, they take it seriously, they do a great job. I've represented a lot of boards in my career, and I have nothing but good to say about them. So that's kind of my presentation.
Okay. The flip side of that is we do lose control. The board then, made up of residents, not elected, would be making some major decisions on some issues, right?
You mean yes.
Special exceptions, things like that.
Conditional use, variances.
All right. Yeah. Commissioner Bradford?
Okay. This is dear and near to my heart, so I'm just going to throw a couple options out here. The review committee is asking, let's say somebody has a problem with a contractor and something that's going on. I have a review committee that's set up of, let's use 5 people out there in the audience, and I'm going to bring to you the contracting industry is regulated by the state. We have a state regulatory agency that even your city ordinances are trumped by. So the state trumps all of these city ordinances. We have a code of books that we have to go by. And to put a committee together that is unaware of licensing regulations and rules is putting the residents in a dangerous position. Because now I'm allowing residents who don't know why is it required to have that trust like that? Why is it required to do this and do that? They have no idea. So Tommy over here is going to come in and he wants to save money. So when he goes to them and he pleads his case, they can make the decision, yep, let him have it. Well, guess what? Technically, they shouldn't have it. There's a safety issue behind that. There's also a state board of appeals that if me as a contractor wants to do something and my building department says, I'm sorry, you can't do that, I can actually go to the state board of appeals and get a decision made. Okay, so if we have any type of, it's not going to be your ordinance review committee that has no idea whatsoever about dealing with building codes. And when I tell you we have a stack of building codes, we have a stack of building codes that we have to go by. It's almost like an attorney in their books. The only way I would agree to have a committee is if it has the architect, a GC, a licensed engineer, a licensed mechanical electrical engineer, a plumbing and HVAC professional, and maybe a fire chief or professional that has experience with those regulations. Those regulations are in place for a reason. Also to say, I've got a problem with your city, and I want you to take it back up with the city official and an ordinance review board, it's a biased decision. We already have a bad reputation with our contractors to not working with them. It needs to be, and I hate to say, I'd rather see the county in charge of it, let them go to the county, or it needs to go to the state. But we have a state review board for a reason, and that our city ordinance needs to be in line with the state regulations, 100%.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Marcia, I think we need to clarify for the rest of the commission what we're talking about in terms of our code and what you're talking about taking apart. What Commissioner Bradford's talking about isn't the same thing that you're talking about.
That's true.
Where the building code and the fire code that is adopted by the state of Florida is law.
That's right.
There is interpretation ability by the building official and the fire official within the chapters of those two codes. And Commissioner Bradford is correct. If there is disagreement on something, there is a process outlined in statute of how to go about appealing it or changing that law. If we wanted, for instance, to require 8-inch fire sprinkler mains on every sprinkler project, there's a process to go through to adopt that and make it a local ordinance here.
That's right.
So can you explain to the commission what we're talking about?
What I'm talking about is interpretation. Generally, when we have a problem with a building official, I'll use Cocoa Beach because I did it for so many years, they do a lot of docks. So docks are an issue. So the chief building official will look at, and a lot of that is state statute too with regards to those kinds of regulations. So the chief building official would look at it and he would say, this isn't, in my interpretation, this doesn't meet the guideline, or you need to do X. The property owner would say, I think that, or a lot of times it was their riparian right or something like that. And the property owner would say, I don't agree with you. Well, the property owner had the right to appeal the chief building official's interpretation, and that went to the Board of Adjustment. So it wasn't like we're not going to follow the law. These get into the realm of interpretation. We just did a number of administrative kind of interpretations on the sign code with some issues we had in the sign code where we're actually doing administrative interpretations so that everybody in the in code enforcement can see that, and we can get some consistency on how we deal with some of the gray area. Not that we're not following the law.
Because it's a workshop, I just want to make sure that I understand. You're saying that we still have to follow the law bottom line.
Oh, of course.
We can disagree with their interpretation.
Yes.
Ultimately, though, you'd have to go to the higher authority, whichever it is.
Well, and that's where some use the appeal to a Board of Adjustment, or, like I put in here, some use the county's board, where the city would enter into an interlocal with the county. The county has a board. And those kinds of interpretive kinds of questions coming from the city would go to the Volusia County's board. We can do that too. But it's not about whether we follow the law or we don't follow the law. We're talking about interpretation. And to be honest, conditional use, those are all interpretations. I'm asking, I want a variance from X. And then, can I have it? What are the criteria? Did I meet the criteria? All of those kinds of things are all interpretations, subjective. The criteria is objective, but determine whether they meet it or not is subjective based on the evidence that's presented. So that's what I'm talking about. And it may be that, we clean up some of these other areas and you take the appeal issue on the building codes and you take that with an interlocal to the county, if that's what you all like. And that's why I specifically put it in the memo so you could see that some do that. For a city to have a kind of board that has all those disciplines is very difficult. It's difficult. You don't get that many cases. It's hard to get all those people lined up. And the only cities I know that have them are places like Boca Raton, Naples. You know, there's a few of those places where even though they're a relatively small city, smaller than you, they have that contracting, licensing kind of board. But in Naples' case, their board, they have a similar board, but their board is all about making sure the contractors are towing the line, kind of a reverse of what you all are looking for. So they have a different kind of goal based on their population and what all their folks want. So there are a lot of options. It's just, you know, basically what you all would like to see. I can write whatever you want. And if you want, we can open up discussions with Volusia County about trying to get an agreement with them so that appeals from the city could go to their board. It's fine.
The problem lies with, if we do our own board, we have, those engineers and architects have to reside in the city. So by contracting with the county, we broaden that base to make it county-wide. There is an advantage to having it be contracted, I think, with the county, and that is we should encourage through the League of Cities and through the Mayor's Roundtable that all of the cities in the county use the same Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Because what happens in many cases, in my former life, you would have somebody that would build something in Orange City, and they would come to Deltona, and I would say, well, no, that doesn't meet the code. You can't do that here. And they said, well, they let me do it in Orange City. Okay, let me get with the fire marshal in Orange City and see if I'm missing something. And 9 times out of 10, believe it or not, the design professional wasn't being totally honest with me. They didn't get to do it in Orange City the way they said. So by having that Board of Adjustment and Appeals serving the county and every city in Volusia County, you send the same message out then to every one of the contractors, and you start to develop a list, if you will, of, okay, well, we did this in South Daytona. Now it's right there for everybody to look at. You can create a library or an index for problems that have been solved. But it is, I do believe it is very important that the Board of Adjustment and Appeals for the building code and for the fire and life safety code be set up as it says in the code and the statute with these professional people in the areas of expertise that the code calls for. In terms of our city code, where we're talking about sign ordinances, where we're talking about nuisance things, zoning type of issues, that's a different story.
Separate.
That's a separate issue. It can go to the same Board of Adjustment and Appeals, but again, who do you put on that board? What influence does this commission then have over that board, being we're appointing those people? So it really gives a lot of transparency and removes a lot of prejudice if we contract with Volusia County to do it, because it takes it out of our wheelhouse as far as our influence over that board.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hertzberg?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that we're looking at two different things here as well. The one thing, when you're looking at the codes that you looked at and cleaning that up and tightening that up, I think that's essential no matter what decision we make, whether or not we do a Board of Adjustment Appeals, contract with the county. And I'm most certainly in agreement with contracting out with the county for the same reasons that were stated. And for consistency, as well as having a second set of eyes look at things. I think that sometimes helps when you take the emotion out of it of what is dealing with in your own city. My concern is with our current code issues and interpretation, just in terms of daily things. If someone wanted to put, a U-drive in on their property, if someone wanted to do a different type of a fence or have a variance for fencing or for driveways or for things like that, I think that there's if there's a way that that could be streamlined and made more simple and more user-friendly and open to, it's still open to interpretation, but a lot of times when you go to one person, they say you need this, another person says you need that. If it could be clarified more, and that's not only here, that's across the board because it is so interpretive. That would be my goal in order to make it easier, not only for the resident, but for code enforcement as well, for them to be able to look at that and what is it actually that, when you look at some of the violations that we have and the interpretation of how to clean up some of those violations, to me, that's a crucial thing. When you've got, 100 pages of things, itemized things on one address, that's an issue. And I know sometimes you can't clean it up, but if there's a way that we can streamline things that makes that easier. And I look at it from not only from the code enforcement officers and that department's ease, I look at it from the people that have to live around those problems and those consistent problems that we have. And if somebody, and former Commissioner Sukup used to say that all the time about, a driveway to put in his area doesn't fit where it normally would be, but because he would have to go around, blah, blah, blah. So, to be able to look at those things, because our lots are very irregular and so forth, would be good, but it's also a determination that if you have continual blight and continual problems and that you've got so many pages of issues on one property, what does that say to your neighbors, and what does that say for the city to be able to make that a better place to live? Because it's not a quality of life for the people that have to deal with that on a daily basis. So if somehow that would be part of it, that would be good.
I kind of agree in a sense with what Marcia said in the beginning. Your statement of recommendation, it's very far-reaching. It could go to everything. Taking the control away from this board, if you will, or this body, to make changes in variance. I have a very good friend who has a trailer, not a motorhome, but a tow-behind house trailer. He can't buy the one he wants. He's living with this small one because it's all he can fit because of the lot sizes. But yet 2 doors from him on a corner lot, the guy's got the exact one he wants, but because he's got a corner lot, he can pull it in the back. He can't get his air conditioner to be able to move it in the back. And it's almost, and please, staff, they did not say this, but I said it to him, not our staff, but I told him, I said, well, move the air conditioner around the back of the house. He says, yeah, but what's that going to cost just so I can pull this motorhome in and out? So we can offer. And that's what I'm afraid of a Board of Adjustments. The residents that aren't really trained, they don't know the legalities, the problems and that go on. I think the Board of Appeals, I'm not going to bring it up, but the recent issue we had with contractors all upset over something, as I read the state statutes, we were right on track. It was a difference of opinion, and I think some of the contractors had good ideas of how it should be adjusted. But the way it was currently written, I'm a layman. I don't know anything about it. I read it. I thought we were right on spot. But then I could see their point of view, too. But that's something that should have been handled at a state level. We shouldn't have got drugged into that. We got drugged into all that battle and back and forth, name call and all. And it really was an interpretation had to be by a higher authority, somebody who knew more about it. Because when you start talking about electrical issues, most of us up here, I don't know everybody's knowledge in that area, but we don't really understand it. So we have to, who do you trust? And I have to go with staff 99% of the time unless I'm familiar with that.
But that is a good example of the type of case that
should be out of
you
our
could
hands.
Send to the county.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's a good example.
So could we live with? I can find out easily by asking Jane to send a letter out. I mean, we can all find out, but I've been saying Jane can send a letter to each city and see if any of them have appeals boards. And then that also we could copy the county and ask if they're willing to even talk about it before we go any further. And then in that case, I would think we should only have that appeals board to appeal decisions that are covered by statute, by state statutes of some kind, not code enforcement issues, not variances, stuff like that. That I would be for. I'm a little bit afraid to get into all this other nitty-gritty stuff. There could be, if we have a rule that says, well, we had years ago, you were around, remember when the carport issue came up? We had so many carports built in this city in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, and then all of a sudden the city in its wisdom or lack thereof, and I was on the board, we decided that we're not going to let any more carports come in after 2004 hurricanes, when in effect we only had 2 of them that really caused any damage. So we were going to outlaw any more at all. And then how do you grandfather those in? So there was a rash of people went out and had them built. And, you know, it gets crazy. So I'm for looking at that first and attacking that problem first, about the Board of Adjustments for technical, professional regulations.
Covered by the state.
Covered by state.
Then that's what I was
Protects the
going
health,
towards.
safety, welfare of the residents.
Right, something that's
Yeah.
regulated by the state.
Building codes
Building
and
codes.
fire and life
Codes and fire
safety.
codes needs to
And
be
life
the
safety.
county, and the regular stuff that, you know, our variances, yes, we handle.
Okay. The regular
Yeah,
stuff,
I was
let's do the
specifically
life
thinking
safety
of something
stuff.
That's something that's technical.
All right. Commissioner Hertzberg and Commissioner Alcantara.
Okay, and then if you want to send that level to, let's say, the County Board of Appeals, where...
Well, first
where-
ask if we can.
Right, but I mean, if that opens up, do we have anything in place for a local situation?
Well, let's tack the first one
But I mean-
first and see what they'll handle, you know, find out what they'll control, and then maybe we could set up something locally for, but it's still, we have to follow our code or change the code. That's where staff
Well,
gets
that ties
upset.
in with the fact of that one way or the other, the code's going to have to be cleaned up one way or the
Yeah.
other.
Currently, it's us.
It's us now. Currently,
Yeah.
we can
We
do
hear
it.
those variances and those things.
We make
currently,
that
because the
decision.
law says, in absence of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, then it falls on.
On us.
On the commission, but how many residents know that they can go ahead and do that and apply and come to the commission to plead their case if they want to go ahead and do something? I mean,
If they're upset enough, normally one of us will get an email.
Well, there's
I mean, you know, if they're upset
75.
about something.
Right now, we have 75 sections in the code that deal with appeals. And I'm not talking building codes and life safety.
Right.
I mean, see, that's part of our problem.
Yep.
It is hard for a person to try and access the city's code and figure out what they're supposed to do.
exactly. And
So that
and
is something, but it doesn't have to, but you can have a process. I mean, if you want to first try and deal with these issues and see what options the city has, and then we bring that back, then we can move forward. This code has to be cleaned up. So it just becomes a question of cleaning up the code and deciding whether the commission wants to keep the variances, the special uses, the conditional uses, or wants to give them to another board. And that's really, it's writing an ordinance, it's moving that over, but in the process, cleaning up the code.
Perfect.
But that could be step 2. So we can do one step at a time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Alcantara?
I was going to say, if the county says, all right, we can do the board, and we send the technical issues to them, and then these other issues, variances, conditional uses, could we have a board here locally that
Sure.
does those?
Yes.
That's what you're saying, the
You
second
could,
step?
the commission could keep it, or you create a board that does it. But in any case, we need to get rid of, what do we have? I can't even, it's like, the numbers are crazy. When I started going through it, I couldn't even believe it, because it's, where is it? Yeah, we had 36 sections that deal with variances, 75 that deal with appeals, 540 sections that deal with conditional uses, 372 sections that deal with special exceptions. How would anybody be able to access this and figure out? So I think it's a question of streamlining, and when we change something in an ordinance, we whack out the stuff that we don't want anymore. So I think in the past it just kind of built on top, and then the answer, the commission will decide: do you all want, once we get a streamline, do you want to do it, or do you want to create a board that does it? But that won't put you in the situation that Commissioner Bradford's concerned about. We still hopefully will be able to get an arrangement with the county, hopefully, that we can send those kinds of appeals to them for their board, because they have a board that has the disciplines. Most counties do, very few cities do.
Are there, do you know of any cases where these variances and conditional uses are left up to a board made up of staff members?
No,
There's always
that's not
outside?
something I would suggest at all. I'm a big fan of resident boards, you know, picking people. They take it very seriously. I've had excellent experience over 40 years of dealing with boards. They take their jobs very seriously. They prepare. As long as we have staff there and a lawyer there to advise them, if you give them good information, they make good decisions.
So
but
as far
again,
as-
it'll be your choice.
So if we didn't do the technical and we just did these other issues and we said, well, since we have the ordinance review committee, let's fold this
Well,
into
you might want to
that
use them.
committee.
You don't want to proliferate, because for each time you create one of these, you have to have staff. So you need a lawyer there and you need a staff person. So if there is a way to put them together, if that's what you all would like, it's my understanding that you have a group that wants work and is looking for work. And if we could figure out how to work this all out, we could give them plenty of work. So, you know, and keep them busy. But again, that can be step 2.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that being an option for us to give the non-technical stuff to the board. And then the cleaning up of the code and redoing the code, that you're saying that you want to hold off because you might not be here.
If you pick me, I'll do it for you, yes. That's what I'm saying.
My thing is that when we get a permanent attorney, that we try to do this ASAP. And because that's something I've heard too, that our code is more urban than it should be.
It's I'm a lawyer, and I have trouble following the sections because they just kind of rolled on each other over the years. And the whole idea, when you create something new, you get rid of the old. You just don't leave it all in there. And it seems like for whatever reason that happened. So we can do it piece by piece. Like if we go through the variances, special exceptions, conditional uses, fix all of that, streamline it, come forward with an ordinance, and in the ordinance what you'll see is the underlying new stuff and the X'd out old stuff, so we get rid of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also the board, though, I guess, just to let you know, the appeals board would only hear the appeal. They still have to follow the current ordinances and regulations or send it to the ordinance review board, and then they could make a recommendation to change the ordinance. But they wouldn't have the right to.
If you send it to the county.
Oh, no, that's on
okay, that's
life
different.
safety. I'm talking about the local one.
Yes.
They would sit out there, but they would still help explain what our codes are.
Yes.
If there was a violation of a code, they would have to bring it back to us to change it.
And they also
get a
hold
special
public
exception.
hearings.
Right.
They hold a public hearing.
Okay.
You know.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, the beauty of using that existing board, the Ordinance Review Committee, is if somebody brought forth a variance to them and the committee saw it and said, well, wait a minute, this ordinance just doesn't make sense. Why are we having to do a variance on this? Then they turn around and recommend to the commission that we change that ordinance. So you've got the body that's working with it having the ability to make those changes as well. Just to put this in a little bit of perspective, in 31 years of doing the fire marshal work, I had one time that we took a case in 31 years to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and we did utilize the county because we didn't have one. So we did utilize the county. In 31 years, we had one case that went that far that it had to be worked out. But so you're not talking about sending. This isn't something that comes up every month where you're sending cases up to the county time and time again. It's very rare to get maybe one or two a year, and that's if there's a lot of development going on. And usually what it winds up being over is new technology. It's some kind of new technology that hasn't been introduced to the code yet, and you're really kind of out there in left field, and you're looking to vet it by a group of professionals to try and get it built the right way. So.
Right. And you heard a story. You remember when I built the daycare over there at Osteen, and they wanted me to put a button on a wall 4 foot high. And it had to be outside in the major. I had to go to Tallahassee and fight with them to get them to say, that doesn't make sense, because every time a child went by, it would hit it. So we got to put it 6 feet high so that the kids wouldn't walk by and hit the... And it was a big red button, too, that flooded. What do they call that system? The foam in the kitchen?
Oh, for the Ansel system.
Yeah, it's the Ansel system for foam in the kitchen. I said, that's going to... But everybody we talked to locally didn't believe it until I went up there, and that board, they looked, they said, this is ridiculous. He makes a lot of sense. They changed it just like that. It was done.
So
The legal term would be attractive nuisance.
So I think
For children.
I think the addressing these 3 things kind of separately, like we are. If it's a building code, fire code, life safety code, we're going to try and get it to go to the county. If it's something, Marcia's going to rewrite our code, the
In those
local,
3
the local
areas.
city code,
Yes.
and then whatever's going to be left over, then hopefully we come up with a local board of appeals here within the city. So I think that makes sense.
And if I could add to that also then, and then my expectation would be I bring you revised code, and then you all decide, do you want to handle it, or do you want to create that
Send it to the board.
to handle it? So we can wait till that point, and then that's a simple ordinance, that 4 or 5 pages, and we can go from there. But you have significantly taken your code, the functionality of your code light years ahead.
So you can have this rewrite to us by Saturday, right?
You mean when you interview me? Yeah, no.
Before the interview. Mitch? Commissioner Honaker?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been jotting down questions, and one of them you pretty much answered. One of them was who was reviewing the ordinances for all those 540 sections. So that's something whatever attorney we hire would do. The professional knows how to do that. And I agree with the Volusia County Board for life-threatening issues. The only one I don't agree with is rolling the Ordinance Review Committee board into it. When you look at the hours in a day for one of our boards, you're really talking the hours in one night each month. So if they're going to hear appeals and then you're not going to get your ordinances reviewed. They can only do so much in a couple hours a night, one night per month. And
I think they would require 2, though, Mitch. Appeals board plus ordinance review.
well, no, she's saying everything would be one.
Well, you could.
So that's why I'm saying don't roll them together, because there's only a couple hours
Okay.
per month
I got you.
that they really work. So, yeah, and if they're looking for anything to do, then shame on us for not giving them more ordinances to look at, because there's so many ordinances, as she's pointed out in so many sections. There's so many things that they could be looking at for it. So staff, if they need something else, let us know, because we'll give them some more ordinances to review. We have lots that need work. I like the local board of appeals for public hearings and all that, but those public hearings take hours. Was my only point, that I don't think we should roll the ordinance review committee up into the one board trying to do everything, because then they're overwhelmed and they're not really doing a good job. So why have them? So, but thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Bradford again, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, just a question, and you guys may have this answer. A lot of these are going to affect staff extremely, and I see them out there nodding their heads, so I'm sure you guys are very much in favor of having these ordinances streamlined, I guess we can say. One thing that I want to make sure of is that they are very active, involved in what you're doing and what the boards are doing. So let me get this right. So when the board has it, are we going to still have a final vote on it, or no?
If we turn it over to the Board of Appeals, as I understand, and Marcia's the expert here, but that would be, people would then file their petition there. That decision, we would have to accept the decision of that board, no questions. If it was in our favor, they would then only could have, or if, in other words, if the county upheld our position, they would have no choice but to go to the court system afterwards. We wouldn't get, this commission wouldn't get involved in it. Now, that's on the other ones, we'd still have control. And I don't want to
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the other ones,
The other
not
one,
the
let's
ones that
wait
are-
till
not
we
the ones
see
that
what
are
the county does on their appeal board, just to what
Right.
level they go and what we want to give them. But the other ones, variances,
That's what I'm talking, the
special
variances
exceptions,
and planning.
those are
and
very
zoning.
touchy, because you
Conditional
have
uses.
a board and somebody comes in and wants a variance from a standardized code that we have, and that's where you got to be very careful that they follow some kind of rule. So that's where her work on the codes first, to get them streamlined, where we're all in agreement that's the way we're going to do it, because this board would then have the authority to say, well, his motorhome's only 3 foot past the distance, we're going to allow him the variance. wow, when that starts happening, then your whole code system falls apart and your regulations fall apart. So that's something we can talk about later, but I think the agreement.
Yeah. I mean, and that's my thing.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying
Yeah.
right now, are we all in agreement, unless I hear otherwise, to move this forward? I'll find out. We'll get, between Jane and I and Sandy, we'll get a letter out to the county and a letter to all the cities, ask how they handle appeals on life safety issues, and that will get the proper word.
Could I just offer just a little bit of clarity to kind of end this discussion? With regard to, if you all make an agreement with the county for them to handle the building codes and fire and life safety,
Yeah, that's the
and
other
you
thing.
send a request for an interpretation to that board, the city will live by whatever their ruling is. That's it.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you say, when we're talking about conditional use, variance, special exception, those things right now come to the commission.
Right.
They're quasi-judicial hearings. Y'all sit like judges. You know, we have to do the hearings special because they're of a different level than, say, your legislative agenda. Okay. If you created a Board of Adjustment, they would have that same thing. They would sit like judges in a quasi-judicial hearing. And if somebody asks for a variance and the board says no, and you have to have criteria as to why you're saying no, then the applicant's only recourse would be to go to court. If it was in front of you all still, same thing. If you say no, according to your criteria, the applicant's only recourse is to go to court. Okay? Just so we're straight
We're not
on.
going to set it up to where they can appeal to the residential appeal board and then come to us as a second. They're done, they go to court.
They're done.
From there. Okay. Is there any, we have our public here. He's here. Would you like to speak? No? Okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing portion, but we're all in agreement then, and I'll just summarize. We're going to find out which cities have boards of adjustments, or if they use a county, and we'll ask the county if they're willing to entertain us branching out with them. And I'll also ask the cities what methods they use on life safety type issues. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is itinerant merchants. Chris Boley is in charge of all of those guys, so he'll tell us about them.
Those roving vendors.
Mayor and Commission, good evening. Chris Boley, Planning and Development Services. One of the items that did go to your Ordinance Review Committee a while back was the itinerant merchants or mobile vendors. This was prompted by a couple of code cases, one of which was down at Providence and Tivoli. There was a hot dog vendor in a parking lot. And then there was another case which was at Providence and Normandy at the southwest corner, and that was a little more elaborate. It wasn't a cart selling hot dogs, but it was an actual, hot plate and grill and tables, chairs, seating, and the whole 9 yards. So whether they exist in the proper zoning or not, the items were discussed, and let me just give you a real quick background, is a city like Deltona, which has a high percentage of single-family detached residential, especially with the advent of working out of your house, off the computer, et cetera, and our large size of 33,000 plus units really lends itself, our platting pattern, our street network, et cetera, that we have more people working out of their house today than we do, say, getting a traditional overhead brick and mortar type situation, while also because we don't have as much commercial space for them to operate too. So that kind of compounds the matter. But when you get into mobile vending and how you regulate that, it could be anywhere from vacuum door-to-door sales to Snap-on Tools is another example, or Charlie's Chips. My apologies for naming specific companies, but you even get into concepts like a roving sale, like ice cream sales down the street with kids with, $1 in their hand chasing after a truck. So
Girl Scout cookies. Girl
Scout cookies is another one. Even, I know it's kind of far-fetched, but somebody signing an electronic pad for a FedEx package. That's an actual sale that occurs on that property. So A lot of this is regulated through the home occupational ordinance. You know, you come in and you get your business tax receipt for a home occupation. That's truly supposed to be for a home office type setting. No stock and trade. We have an ordinance for it. But, you know, the lines are kind of blurred, and of course the ones that do invest in the traditional brick and mortar and have, you know, a permit for that work out of, say, a C1, or might even go through a rezoning process to set up their business, they see somebody across the street, you know, that isn't doing that same thing, incurring those costs. So under the former city attorney, we got pretty far along with this and with the ORC. And then it sort of stalled because there was lots of discussion between itinerant merchants, mobile vending versus roving sales, and that's sort of where it left off. So there was a request by the commission to bring it back. I'm just going to open it back up, and the only suggestion I may make is maybe some type of consideration for a special events permit. It would take rewriting the code to allow for that, and however that gets reviewed by you to allow for those special exceptions. That's all I can really come up with.
What commissioner felt the need to have this addressed, and what were your major concerns?
I think that was me, Mayor.
Huh?
Me?
Okay, what was the major concern that you were trying to address? Because the ordinance 04-2017 is the one that's printed here that you gave us a copy of, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. That's a draft.
Yeah, it's a draft. This was never enacted, right?
Yes, sir. No. It was never enacted.
That's what I'm saying.
No.
And this was sent to the Ordinance Review Committee, correct?
Correct. And their comments are attached in your agenda memo package.
That's what you got in the back.
I'm trying to find those comments because
it starts with section 23-91 definitions, and then, you know, it's got highlighted areas as to, you know, what they responded, who might have made the response.
I'm sorry, I don't have that on my copy. I'll have to pull it on here. My concern was for the fact that at some point, the commission and the city need to really go ahead and look at mobile food vendors and, oh, thank you so much. That helps. Mobile food vendors, and as the city grows and as we have more events brought into the city, what you're looking at is more festivals. You're looking at more mobile businesses, exactly what you said. And the mobile business aren't necessarily food trucks. They're mobile veterinarians. They're mobile other things that take away business from your brick and mortar. From your brick and mortar businesses that are paying property taxes and licenses and everything else.
Right.
And we're not talking about like the things like signing a FedEx package and so forth and home businesses, although I would like this commission at a future date to look at the home business ordinance as well. When we start looking at some of the code things, I'd like to bring that back up for review, at least to have have it brought to a workshop at some point for a discussion. But I think that as the city grows and as we have more plazas and we have things where we're building out on our community center, there have to be uniform rules and regulations for what we are going to accept as acceptable vendors and so forth, and what type of permits are we going to have. Because if there's not anything done at this point, it's going to be a free-for-all. And already every time that the vendors set up in certain areas, we get emails, we get pictures, we get calls about traffic problems. Because for me, you're not only looking at, you know, a business setting up across the street from a brick and mortar business, you're looking at the adverse impacts for traffic and parking needs and pedestrian safety. To me, you're looking at that. You're looking at noise and visual and aesthetic blight. Those are just some of the things that I looked at, because when you're looking at having a vendor in a small parking lot, it's creating traffic issues. It's creating walking issues. And it maybe is a little bit just now, a little here and there, but as the city grows, believe me, if there's nothing in place now, it's going to get worse and worse. You're going to have congestion in and out of businesses, and the business doesn't care because they've got, a lot of times they don't, but the adjacent businesses might, who you're cutting through to get through that vendor. And not only that, it becomes a visual blight situation, and once you allow one to set up, if Joe can set up here, why can't I set up over there and get permission from a property owner to set up? So when you're looking at that, do we have anything that we're looking at in itinerant vendor permits? Do we have anything about a host license? If you're a plaza and you're going to allow these itinerant merchants to set up, you should have something as a host license. The same thing if you're going to have, if you have a piece of a property that you want to have a festival on, you should have a host license. You should be able to, someone has to have responsibility for that. And if you have that overage, then that person is responsible indirectly for whoever they allow on their property to sell or to provide a service and so forth. And whether that's us at our new community center or whether that is, now just take an example up there. You have our new community center going in. You have all that vacant land up there. All that vacant land. If it starts getting busy, is someone going to want to be able to set up there? Who's going to control what goes on there if they get the landlord permission or the owner permission? I mean, and you're going to have a festival there. What do we have in place to address the safety and the impact on the neighborhoods, on neighboring businesses, on the residents, and the safety factor, and the impact on our public safety? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was my concern, to bring something forward to see what we can live with and have the commission address. It's a future need of the city because, as we all know, food trucks are more and more. And when we do this and you do itinerant vendors, I mean, I would hope that we're going to have something in there for the food vendors to have, from the Florida Department of Professional Regulation and any applicable what do you want to say, things in there that show that they have health certificates and so forth, to do that. I mean,
yeah, we don't have anything. I think Chris has a great idea as far as using some kind of special event permitting. Mm-hmm. I reviewed this ordinance and immediately called Chris, and I think the ordinance doesn't help us. The definitions are poor. Mm-hmm. You can't tell between a roving versus an itinerant versus a this, and I think we need something that is more holistic, which is, I think, what Chris is talking about. Right. I think we need to just craft something new. Absolutely. I don't think this works at all, and it's not forward-looking. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like trying to define what these people were at some other time.
Well, you're trying to fit these people in. You're creating an ordinance around what's there.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the best thing to do, because what's there now should be, you have to look at the greater scope. Look at Halifax Health and all their property that they have out there. Look at the potential for itinerant vendors to come up there. Look at the potential for you to have a campsite set up during Bike Week and have tents and everything set up there. Look at the future of something like that, and what do we have in place that ensures the safety and the quality of life for those that are affected by that across the board for our existing and our future. I think we need to do better.
Chris and I both think we can do better.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you brought up a good point, Commissioner, is that you have a chapter in your Land Development Code, Chapter 75, which addresses site plan review and approval. So anybody coming in with a mobile vendor kind of usurps that, because you just pull up to the site and now you are set up as a business and you don't have stormwater management, you don't have access management. So some of those things you were bringing up, public safety, compatibility, all go away by being mobile. So maybe it's a matter of looking at roving sales versus itinerant merchants, and you can't do exclusionary zoning, but you could put the itinerant merchants in locations that you want to see them, like a food truck, for example, and a C1, for example. So, and we could work with the attorney on that and come up with maybe a special exemption permit.
And I like the special event concept because that way you can address aesthetics and blight and all of those kinds of issues, but also give yourself the flexibility that if somebody did want to come in and do some kind of food festival or something like that, we'd have the ability to deal with it. which right now we have bad definitions and
Right.
no real ability to deal with something like that.
And we all know that once something comes up like that and we allow it one time, it's the same thing. Well, we did this last year, and why can't we do this? And the next one comes in because people will take the path of least resistance. We all will. And if you can make money off of a piece of property where no one's controlling who's there, what you do, and how long you can be open, how long, because with that all comes music, it comes noise and everything else. And I'm not saying you don't want to not encourage that. I would love for more of that to come to the city. But if it does, the city has to be prepared for the ramifications and be able to handle that and control it for the quality of life of our residents. And that's why I say that, because I just feel like this city is on the verge of having a lot of really good things happen, especially when the center is open.
And for a long time, we didn't allow it at all, then we were talked into making exceptions to it.
Well, and you also have to address the alcohol
Vice Mayor.
factor. I mean, you really
Right.
want to address that in there as well. Are you going to have any type of permitting for alcohol consumption?
Well, you also got to
well.
look at every organization in the city that does events, selling little booths, which is vendors, is how they could really afford to put on a lot of these events they're putting on. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Jerry, did you have something you want to contribute?
Yeah, I can relay what he just said, which is, we do have a special events permit through the Parks Department, and they sign off on things, like for spectacular, let's say, but it needs modification.
And that probably needs to be looked at.
Yes, sir.
The Parks Department should not be issuing permits. It should be, the permitting department should be issuing permits, not parks, but that's fallen on deaf ears for the last 20 years. One of the things that drives me absolutely crazy in a lot of our ordinances is one of the exceptions is whether or not it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. If it's a blight issue, if it's a safety concern, what difference does it make if they're making money or they're not making money? Please do not include that in any future ordinances. That is, it's either okay or it's not okay based on its own merits, not on whether they're making money or not making money. I don't want to do something here that's going to drive food vendors, glass windshield installers, home pet grooming vans. I don't want to do anything that's going to upset those people and cause those people to leave, because they're providing necessary services. They're providing, a lot of these food vendors that are in these trucks and stuff operating on the corners, they've got some pretty doggone good food. And the fact that they're there week after week after week says there's a clientele here in the city that wants them. Specifically to the food vendors that are cooking, there are regulations that are in place already through the health department, through our business tax license office, and through the fire code. And we in years past have previously dealt with some of those folks that are running a barbecue, or they're running a beans and rice kind of product that they've got out there. Good. We have sausage. We have, I don't know that any of them have liquor licenses to be able to sell beer or wine. I've not seen that at any of them.
You can't get them.
You have to have a physical location.
Yeah, you have to have a physical location to be able to do that. And I agree with what Commissioner Hershberg said in terms of having the property owner signing off on it. And there's got to be, I know with the hot dog vendor that you had brought up at Tivoli and Providence, I know there is an agreement there between the church and them. But in terms of setting up competition with brick and mortar, we had this discussion when we had the farmers market at Tivoli and Providence, and the vegetable vendor there, in terms of what it was going to do to Applebee's right across the street. Right. So
she didn't care.
No, competition's good. So when we recraft this ordinance, what we need to do is make sure it's something that's common sense, that allows for those vendors to be in places. Things like, are they there for 5 minutes or less than an hour, those are immeasurable things. There's nobody from code enforcement that is going to have the time to go by and start a stopwatch on somebody and say, oh, they were there more than 15 minutes or something. That's ridiculous. They're either okay to be at that location 7 days a week, 365 days a year, or they're not okay to be there. This thing that they can only be there 3 times a year and it can't be more than twice in 6 months. Again, who's tracking
garage
that?
sales. Nobody tracks
That's
it.
ridiculous. So when we write this ordinance, let's make sure that it's something that's common sense and something that is attainable and doable, not only for the vendor, but also something for code enforcement, so they don't have to be bothered with it. If the person's licensed by the city to be at that location and there's an owner's agreement from the property owner to them, that's really all our concern should be. They're either safe and inspected and they passed and they can be there 7 days a week in these operating hours, or they can't be. That's what I'm looking for when we draft this, not something that's got a whole bunch of conditions and stuff that falls back on code enforcement.
What we don't want to see.
Yeah. No, I want to see something that's simple and user-friendly, not something that's got a lot of conditions.
It just says spells out what we don't want to see. In other words, you can
And I like one of the things that you said, Chris, not to put a damper on the whole thing. Maybe one of the ways to address this is within zoning classes. You know, this is permitted in C1, but not in C2 or whatever. Maybe addressing what is allowed and just adding some more categories to those zoning classes. So that's easy for the girls at the counter to be able to see, oh, this guy wants to operate at Tivoli and Providence. Well, first of all, what's the zoning there? Is it permissible in that zoning? So let's just keep it simple. I like that this proposed ordinance wasn't 20 pages long, but again, I think the whole thing needs to be scrapped and rewritten. It just more common sense needs to go through.
make sure it can't be appealed to our appeal board if we set it up, Commissioner Bradford, because it'll surely be appealed, I guarantee.
Well, I'm actually glad to see this brought up. I've got a lot of acquaintances that, like you were talking, it competes. It does compete with a lot of businesses. And the reason is not everybody has a huge capital outlay that they can put out for that business. I've got a friend who's now got a mobile, basically designing van that goes around and sells, clothes. I've got somebody who does, the food trucks. I've got so many different friends. We've got jewelry. And I understand how much it costs to run a facility. That overhead is expensive. We can't be, and you've hit, Vice Mayor, a lot of things that I was going to bring up, and being, okay, well, this is allowed, but this isn't allowed. We can allow that type of business. Oh, but your business, we can't have that. That's not right. We have to be very unbiased in our decisions when we create this ordinance. By all means, I don't think any one of us want any unsightly vehicles. I did have an individual bring something up to me. They actually own a bounce house where they, what happens to these vehicles when they're done for the day?
They own a what?
They own a bounce house company.
Oh.
So they're the ones who take the bounce houses and set them up. And the kids go and have a lot of fun, and they use a lot of water, and, what happens to those trucks? I mean, even the food trucks and the clothing trucks and the jewelry trucks and all these vendors, where do they go? They go home. And one of the vendors, who happened to be the bounce house truck, said, Commissioner, they're telling me I have to move my truck or they're towing it. So, well, why is that? Because unloaded, my truck is this many pounds, but loaded, it's this many pounds, and so they're telling me I have to move it even though it's in my private drive and nobody's complained about it. So where am I supposed to put it? I will take it down to a local parking lot and leave it there, which he had to do. And you know what happened to him? He lost everything because somebody broke in and took absolutely everything that he owned out of his truck. So now his livelihood and his business was taken. So we need to take into consideration the other side of this as well. And that is they have to have a place to put this business, which is a mobile business. So please keep that in consideration and understand that's their livelihood. It's just like me telling a jewelry store owner, you can have your jewelry store there, but I want you to leave the doors unlocked. We can't do that. That's putting their livelihood at a huge disadvantage and a huge risk. And when that's gone, they have nothing. So I ask that we keep that as a major consideration as well. And that's my biggest thing is I want this to be very unbiased and fair across the line. And you nailed another thing, which I was going to bring up is I love my not-profits, but you know what? There's no difference between that not-for-profit and us having a business and running it. We all pay taxes, and we're all out there to do the same thing, and that's to raise funds. So that's just the one thing that I ask, if we can clarify and be a little sensitive to parking. I'm not asking to have a semi park there, but if it fits in their drive, it's not in anybody's way, we need to look at things.
All right. Commissioner Honecker.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Volusia County has a itinerant merchant solicitor's permit. It's total cost was $85 plus I think $15 last time I looked at it for fingerprinting. They have to have that also because it's a Florida statute that each county will issue a permit. So if you want to look at Volusia County stuff when you're looking at this and writing it up, Chris, they have to have a permit. Edgewater, where I worked, also had an itinerant merchant solicitor's permit, and they had to have a signed, notarized permission slip from whoever that property owner is, and it has to have a facility there. You say, well, what if they're not serving food? Why? The people that work it have to use the bathroom. They cannot use the bathroom out in the public open. So they have to set up where there is a building and have that property owner's permission. If you're just setting up on an empty corner, then they're using the bathroom somewhere.
Porta potty.
Yeah, so those are things to look at. But it has to be signed, notarized. There has to be facilities on it. Nonprofits are mentioned in the Florida statute. You can make them go through the process of applying, and like the Boy Scouts going around town, and they have to give you a list of everybody that's going from door to door and who the supervisors are going to be, and they have to have their ID with them all the time. But they are exempt, nonprofits are exempt from paying permit fees in the statute. So look at that statute from Florida. They exempt nonprofits from paying the fees, but they have to go through the whole thing.
Not exempt from the permit, just the
Right,
fees.
that's what I'm saying. They have to go through everything, but you have to exempt them from the cost.
That's what we're talking. We're talking
Yeah.
they can't be exempt from
So that was the only thing.
regulations that we all have.
Yep, they have to follow all the rules, but you have to exempt them from the cost. So look and see if that's still part of the statute, but because our office down there, the city clerk's office actually had to issue the permits and do up the IDs with them and stuff. It was a pain. When there was only two of us, so that meant me. So that was my only comments on it. I think it's a good idea. It's long overdue. Just anybody coming into the city and setting up, and when our businesses are paying all these taxes, get the property owners notarized permission to say, yeah, I don't mind them setting up there. So anyway, thanks.
All right. Commissioner Hertzberg, if you'll allow me, I want to add something.
Sure.
What about zone? You talked about, Vice Mayor brought up zoning. What if we had areas in the city where we could allow them to go? I don't like the idea of taking it away from a church or whatever to get some extra income or whatever else. But I remember years ago when you couldn't put a sign on a fence, and then the interpretation was you could put signs on a ball field fence, but that meant inside at the back. Now there's signs out front. And today, as I was coming by, and I'm not opposed to this or anything, it's what it is today. But I noticed there's a sign on the corner by Racetrack up on Howland where, your advertisement could be here. Deltona High School is looking to put it on the fencing around the school. Now, that's for this whole board to talk about, and I have my own personal opinion, but I know we have it at Trinity, we have it out, there's been a couple out at Pine Ridge over the years, but I never seen them blatantly say, this spot could be yours, kind of like they advertise it on the benches. So, we got to be careful how we write this, but what about a zone where, you had a zone set aside in the city where you could do it, or it's just every business in town that has room? Because if you read your ordinance is stating in it, I don't know if the commissioners all read it or not, but it states there they can't use any parking that has been approved for the permit for the company. So if you could build a building in here, and I've built several buildings in Volusia County, when you do, you put in the number of parking spots required, maybe by accident, you might have one or two extra, but your permit to go ahead and build is predicated on that design you submit.
Right.
So technically, nobody would have additional parking on their site. Am I not right? You do this every day.
You're correct.
So then this ordinance would disallow anybody from doing any of this on any property in the city because there's no additional parking there. It goes back to what Commissioner Hertzberg said, maybe vacant fields adjoining. But we just had a great thing at the fire department, you got your shirt on, this last Sunday. And we can't do that anymore. Because if Larry Cavallero ever sells any of those properties there, the fire department had all those lots, and wait until we open the center out there. Hopefully we've got sufficient parking, we planned appropriately, but my gosh, what a mess it's going to be if we and I want it to come, but when those other lots are filled, we wouldn't be able to use that fire station anymore.
That's what happened on Providence.
And that's what happened on Providence. So,
But that's what the event center's for.
well, that's what we,
Parking there.
we talked, that was one of the things we talked about months ago, but maybe we need that, or maybe we allow vendors at certain parks for certain things, for special events that I think one of you brought up.
Well, I think a good lot. Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor.
The thing is like you take a look at, just as an example, Providence Plaza. Okay, now it's starting to fill back up again. Let's not even use Providence Plaza. Let's use the plaza that's at Cortland and Cortland and Doyle. Okay, the old Winn-Dixie there. Winn-Dixie's been out of there for several years. Now, if a vendor with a food truck or two or three food trucks wants to go and set up there on a Friday night, and he's got an agreement with the property owner that allows him to be there, and he's going to give the property owner 10% of his sales for his use of that area, why is that a problem? There's nothing operating there. There certainly isn't a parking issue there because the Winn-Dixie's been closed for years. So when we craft this, we have to craft it in such a way that makes some sense. I'm going to give a little plug here for Jerry. We're trying to move residential home-based businesses into brick and mortar. Well, in the 1960s, this little hot dog trailer here in Illinois called Portillo's opened up on North Avenue and Portillo's, North Avenue, and Portillo's today is in Bradenton, Florida. They have 36 locations in the Chicagoland area and are in 4 other states. So food trucks, you never know where it can go. A little trailer here in Deltona could end up becoming an international business.
Sure.
So we need to be careful when we limit what these folks' potential is, because it could turn into brick and mortar for us. Just as a home-based business, we're encouraging them to grow, to come into a potential incubator if we get an incubator, and then from the incubator to go actually into filling up one of our plazas.
Well, I think a good logical step is make a clear distinction between roving sales and allow them anywhere, because they're going to go door to door anyway. They'd be like a FedEx truck. And mobile vending, and then put them in commercial areas like C123, I1, those are set zoning districts that you have currently that can accept that. And so if there is ingress and egress coming and going, turning around the vehicles, whatever, plugging in, it's more commercial oriented. So that's kind of a logical approach that I think we'll take with the attorney on this.
And then, you have to look at, but let's not put stuff in here that we're not going to demand of everybody. Like if this section that I talked about parking, if we're not going to follow that, then let's take it out of here. You know what I'm saying?
All right.
Commissioner Hertzberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Then have a section in there, or have something where they have a site plan, Where are they going to put it? Because if you want to talk about, you said exactly what I had written down. There's a difference between mobile vending. There's a difference between a mobile delivery service, bringing a food to a door, a mobile pet grooming, your windshield things, or an ice cream truck going through the street. That's one section. The other thing is a stationary vendor that actually parks their vehicle there and does either a food truck, a mobile shot clinic for every weekend, or it does a veterinary service or something. Those are actually stationary, where somebody has to drive up, park their vehicle, get out, and purchase an item or a service.
They'd have to follow the sign code.
That is one thing where you're required to go, park, get out of your car, and purchase something or have a service done for you. It's not a mobile groomer or somebody that goes to your house and provides a service in the city, or nobody wants to touch those. Whatever they're doing, I mean, if they have to have a permit, okay, fine, whatever, or some sort of a license, whatever. But my concern is for a stationary vendor, whether they're every single day of the week from 9 to 5, or whether they choose to come every single weekend and set up, because that gas station on the corner of Providence and Normandy is a prime example. When they are set up in that corner, how do you get in and out? Where do you park? You have to park in the next plaza over, and so forth. So, I mean, but again, when you look at something like that, and not to mention, and I'm not picking on the one business, but there were people that sent pictures in of what an eyesore it is and what a problem it is with parking. Those are the kind of things you want to look at. And if you're going to talk about the old Winn-Dixie and they want to have a food truck extravaganza and they want to go there, they come and they fill out a vendor thing, they get permission from the host, and they're done, and they can have it every single night as long as that's,
I think that you just hit the nail on the head. Part of the complaints we get are not about the vendors, they're not about the food, they're about what it looks like. So if you go out there and you got a junky-looking old vehicle, it's smoking and making a mess, ugly-looking equipment out there, and it's not polished and clean, that's what people get upset about. And so to the vendors out there, you got to keep your best foot forward with the looks of your facility, so we can't do that as a government. We have to write the regulations. And,
But you can control the public safety aspect of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's all we can do.
That should be our job.
Commissioner Bradford?
Yeah, I love everybody. One problem that I have is sometimes I think we try to overregulate and we overdo what we need to, because we try to, we got this instance and we got this instance, and oh my goodness, I mean, we could be doing this for days, and we could have regulations that are 10 times as long as this. And what it comes down to, as Commissioner Hirschberg said, is public safety, well-being of the residents. I personally don't feel that, what right do we have to tell a property owner, a business owner, you can't have them there? That's not, look, excuse me? This is my property and I pay taxes on it. You want to tell me what and who I can have here? I have a problem with that, but if it comes down to the well-being and the safety and it's a hazard, then that's a different story. That's when the VCSO steps in and says, hey, we've got a traffic problem going on here. There's a safety issue. Hey, fire marshal, we've got a problem here. But then that's going, and that's, I guess it would be falling under state regulations if it comes to fire safety, food safety, because they have to have, like food vendors, they have to have the food handler's permit. So those are all things that are going to file under those. But I think we need to tread on the side of caution that we do not over-regulate this and do not overstep our boundaries. That's just a concern I have.
Okay. Vice Mayor, before you do, I just want to say part of what some of the suggestions from that Ordinance Review Committee is, there's a section that says mobile vending vehicles are not set up permanently but stop only temporarily to make sales shall be exempt. And it goes on to say some more stuff. But that's kind of what Heidi was talking about. If it's the Safe Light, we see that commercial all the time where they come to your house and do it. That's wonderful. Or they can do, pardon me?
No, I said that's good.
No, I said we want those kind of things, and I don't have any problem with that. It's the ones that set up that section here that says they can't occupy current permitted parking places. So that really eliminates anybody from going to an existing facility. It stops them from it, whether it's church or anything. They can't. So do we want to go that far, or are we just over-regulating to the point?
No,
where it's-
we'll rewrite it. We'll make sure it's clean.
I think
That's
I think Chris and I have enough direction to at least get a
Yeah,
draft.
because that's what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to impact the needs of the church on Sunday, so they weren't allowed to do it on Sunday, but they could do it Saturday because the church wasn't in operation where they needed parking. So a little bit of common sense is fine. But I mean, every one of these codes and every one of these ordinances, you could find exceptions to it. What wasn't allowed 3 years ago is now allowed, and then it gets out of control, and then we try to stop it, and we've got so far into it that it's bad. So, Vice Mayor?
We used to have an ordinance, Dale, back when we first became a city. We didn't allow any outside vendors
Yeah,
in
right.
a commercial 777 Deltona Boulevard.
Right.
You couldn't have anybody out in the parking lot, couldn't have anybody out on the sidewalk, okay? And we had a fireworks vendor set up out in their parking lot. And we ended up going to court and getting an injunction, and we didn't stop them on the fireworks sale. We stopped them on the zoning
Right.
side of it, is where the judge ruled and said that it wasn't permitted within that zoning. But then it came back to the commission, and Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong, I know for a fact that we have to provide a zoning where fireworks can be sold in the city, and that is currently the industrial zoning. But does that apply to these food vendors as well? Do we have to provide a zoning in which they can operate?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that zoning issue with the fireworks is peculiar to
State
that
statute.
statute for
Yes.
firework sales.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's been a lot of
got a
issues
big
on that
lobbying
lately,
group.
you know,
Okay.
but no, you don't have to. The question is, again, you don't want to overregulate, but you want to be forward-thinking with regards to what you think is going to happen, and you do have to have enough regulation so you don't have just wild and crazy in the streets. So you're looking for something that strikes that balance, you know, of what can we do that solves as many problems as we can without impeding on people's choices.
Well, the internet.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah, go
done. I'm done. I'm looking forward to seeing a draft.
Well, the internet in itself is caused. UPS, FedEx, and the Postal Service are up and down. I live in a small street with maybe 10 or 15 people. They're up and down there constantly, where you never used to see them before because everybody buys everything on Amazon. So, Commissioner Alcantara, go ahead, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I just was going to add that, I would like to see maybe if it's a monthly event or something that's reoccurring every month for vendors to set up for. I have also a lady reached out to me. She paints pictures, and she's like, I don't know where to sell this, and I could really use the money. Maybe where, residents can set up their artwork, or maybe, the Peshas, maybe they grew some vegetables they want to set. So maybe it could be a monthly event to bring the community together, too. That's something we could look to do.
I don't want to bring it up tonight, but in line with what you said, I've had a couple people ask me, why don't we have a flea market here?
Well, that's...
Well, we tried it, a farmer's market, yeah, but you know what I'm saying. They closed the one down that was there in the land right on 1792, and I don't know that we have a large tract of land, whether we want to get into that business, but the point is a lot of people have said that because these people do home crafts and stuff, have no place to do it because we have not been... We have a few craft shows here, but we don't do them often enough. Maybe with the new building, that might be an opportunity because that's such a bigger building. We may be able to do more of those craft events
Well, we could also
on
do
a
it
non-booked Saturday or something,
We could also do it in Dewey and
we could do them outdoors.
do outdoors.
depending on
events.
the weather.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you guys got enough information to move forward? Because I think this ordinance... and, I wish staff, I guess I'll direct this to Jane, when we get ordinance brought forward, though, I know I always look at the back page to see if I signed it, but we don't always get a copy of the signed ordinance. So could you make sure you put draft only or something? Because it's confusing, because I showed it to somebody and they were reading and they said, I don't remember this ever being approved. I said, well, that's not signed. I don't think we ever approved it, but I wasn't really sure without coming back and finding out later. So, I mean, let's indicate on those all the time now that they're not approved, or something, stamp something across the front or come up with some kind of policy. let you all work on that. Okay, did you, anybody, you have nothing? He's busy on the internet. You want to say anything? No, you never do. Okay. All right, well, we gave you the opportunity. The other thing I want to bring up before we go, and I didn't have a chance to talk to Jane, just to give you an update on some information because we're all together and I can't talk to you all. The League of Mayors, or what's that title? Round Table of Elected Officials. It's kind of formal. It sounds like King Arthur's court. Anyway, we went to the meeting today. Basically, the update is the recommendations will come from the survey that was done on the sales tax in January. The actual consultant will be there to give it. But some of the highlights that City Manager Yarborough gave out was, and Jane had already shared some of this with me, but formally today, that they think a half-cent sales tax has a good chance of passing countywide. It'll be in next year. And a half-cent sales tax will draw about $45 million into the county. They've pretty much, it's not in concrete, so you can't really say they've agreed, but the consensus is to move forward with a formula that would be based probably on population per capita. So we would get a good share of that amount of money. I think Daytona's was 1.3 million. Ours is 2 something. But anyway, it's going to be not for transportation only. It's going to be for infrastructure. So infrastructure could cover transportation. It could cover other things. That's what they're pushing as of now, but the group hasn't made a final decision yet. Then in January, we'll get the report. April or May, we'll probably start lobbying the county to get it on the ballot for general election, not the primary. They say the general's the best one. And then we, as a city, could do what we can to decide how we're going to spend that money. So that couple $1 million a year would have to be earmarked for projects. We'd probably do that the second year, I guess, after, we kind of get a better handle on how much money's coming in, and help fine-tune that closer. But we'd start looking at infrastructure improvements. It may go a long way. If it passes, again, we won't know. I'll be out of office, but it'll be 2019. But if it passes, what a boon that would be for us as far as infrastructure we could do for economic development purposes. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't call it that. We'd call it, infrastructure upgrades. You were talking about the gas. There's a funding mechanism now to put those gas lines in. Underground utilities are some things that a couple of people talked about. We've never had the money to talk Duke or, Florida Power Light because it's so costly to put power lines underground. So maybe on our plazas, our real important buildings that need to be up and running, this section on Tivoli that was shut down, maybe we can do some underground electrical work. But this is something we'll talk about later, but I just want to give you an update that they are moving forward with it. The study's done. The final report will come after the first of the year, so we can have a good holiday season, and then we'll start hard on it after January.
Mayor, what was Deltona's total?
I don't have it. I don't have it with it. Ours is over $2 million a year, though.
And there's no defining of any projects?
Not yet.
You're not going to have a list that you have to provide?
They haven't decided yet, ma'am, whether what it was started out as a transportation thing. That's gone by the wayside. Now they pretty much agreed that it will be infrastructure based. That way each city can make their own mind up how they spend it. You know what I'm saying? And that's just what we're talking about. So next item on the agenda is public comments. We don't have any, so we have city. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something else? I see you up there.
Well, it's a shame that's taken that turn, because the original reason for that whole conversation taking place was because the gas tax revenues are down so low, and those dollars, we were looking to try and make those dollars up by some other mechanism. It doesn't fix our long-term transportation needs. It's another tax, and Daytona is the one that's really driven that issue about it being for infrastructure. And we just need to be very careful as we move forward with that and think about how we want to do that, because we're going to be in a situation here after we go through the transportation dollars that we've currently got on the books from the transportation bond. What are we going to do for transportation when those dollars run out?
We may have the advantage, though, Vice Mayor, of having that money that we can use for matching money to put projects in that others won't have the money. So we can move if our agenda is transportation related, that's infrastructure, so we can move forward our project. It'll be each city. I think the argument was some of the cities may use it for things other than the original intent when we started it.
Just saying, we need to be very careful when that ballot language is actually created, what it says.
Yeah,
in there.
that's why they're going to wait till after the first year. All right, Ms. Shang, you have the floor, and then we'll adjourn.
Yes, I have two announcements. I just want to remind everybody that this Saturday, on the 14th, we have a special commission meeting that will start at 8:30 to select, to interview, and then potential candidates for the city attorney position. The second, I just want to remind everybody that on Monday, October 23rd, there is no workshop. So the next workshop will be November 13th. And we also agreed that the last workshop of the year, November 27th, that will be devoted to our facilitator to discuss the roles and responsibilities of the commission and staff.
Yeah, well, that's the Mitch Honaker meeting we're going to have.
Well, they had that button so low in Osteen so you could reach it.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What time is that going to be the same as our workshop times?
The one on the 27th?
Yes.
No, that will start at 5 o'clock.
5, that's what I thought. I just want to change that.
November 27th, it will be 5
to 8?
To 8 or so.
That's
on the 27th. Right, on the 24th, there's a meeting.
Isn't that Thanksgiving?
Yes.
No, not November.
I'm sorry.
October the 24th. There's a meeting for something to do about the disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there is a meeting on Deltona preparation for potential evacuees who will be coming to the city. That is October 24th. I believe it's at 6:30.
Here?
Yes.
Yeah, just a second. Just a second. I'll get to you. Another thing I wanted to mention, Jane, that they said there's a lot of talk about debris. Please believe me, as much as the frustrations we have, guys, they were echoed 100-fold by all the rest of the cities. Every single city. One city, and I don't want to embarrass them by saying, but their general fund, and that's why I support our staff and what they're doing with our finances here, their general fund had $123,000 in it unencumbered. They've spent $139,000 already on debris removal for 20%. They're going to have to borrow money at a high rate just to get the trash out of there. Also, nobody, the 16 cities, has received money yet from Matthew.
FEMA money.
Also, South Daytona, he told me, or he told all of us today, they just received a FEMA reimbursement from 2011 that they had a storm that they got some FEMA money for. They just got their reimbursement check in the last several weeks. I think it was 2011. It was years ago, though. So FEMA is way behind, and they also had a whole lot of not very favorable comments about FEMA's ability to interact with elected officials. So, and a question, and then we're going to be done.
Mayor, I just wanted to say, luckily, the city of Deltona is not in that position. And that's because we have our disaster recovery fund.
Right.
And that this commission has agreed with their foresight to fund for those emergencies. And I have to give credit that we never want to have an emergency, but if we do, at least we have the funding.
All right. Mr. Alcantara had a question.
I just want to say real quick, I won't be able to be here Saturday because I got to go to the mandatory training. I haven't done it, so this is my last opportunity to do it. It's in Jacksonville.
What?
The mandatory elected official what is it?
Ethics.
Yeah, what do you call it?
IEMO.
Yeah.
There's one in DeBerry.
No, IEMO.
He's going to the emo.
Yeah, so I hadn't done it before, so this is my last opportunity to do it, so I'll be up there. I want to know if I could turn in my questions and have someone ask them for me.
Ooh.
What?
I don't.
Let me, I think,
I don't know.
at least I'd like to know what, we'll have to figure out a process, I guess.
I don't. I've never had that happen where somebody wasn't here. I mean, I don't know.
I'd like to know questions.
And
I'll tell you what.
and it'll be the
if you have
same questions for everybody, like each one.
That's what I'm saying.
will
If
be the
you
same
put the
question.
questions in there, but I don't know how they would answer without you here to ask them.
I thought we were allowed to submit the questions and then she was going to combine
Yeah,
them.
but you tell the. No.
No?
Jane set out a list of questions.
Right.
You could choose whatever questions you want to ask. You can choose from that list or make your own up. The only thing that is required is that we ask the same question of each of the three
Correct.
candidates.
Yeah, he's not saying he needs to be here to hear them.
Yeah.
No, I don't, because I can hear them later in the recording, or I can.
I don't.
Or it might be a question that.
I don't see why we can't. I don't see. Does anybody have an objection with that? Legally, I don't think there's anything wrong with
There's
it.
nothing legally wrong.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
As
But-
long as you vote
but-
for me.
Oh,
She's
strike
not
that.
biased at all.
No, I just want to say something, and I think I don't want it to be misleading, and not because you're just new. You haven't been through one of these. Don't think you could send 20 questions. If we get 3, because each one of them. Well, you don't know. Well, you're limited, but it has to go through all of us, and depending on how much time the candidates spend answering them. We've tried it before, and we're lucky if we get 3 trips around.
Well, what if? Well, what if? Like if my questions, because I don't want to duplicate someone else's questions. So if
what
it
I'm
was
getting
already
at.
answered, then
That's
the ones
the
that weren't
problem.
answered could be asked.
If it's a duplicate of what somebody else asked, we'll just ignore it.
Okay.
We'll just say, Commissioner Alcantara wanted to ask the question, but so-and-so's already asked it, then we'll move on. We'll just skip you, go to the next guy.
Mayor?
I'm not going
Prepare
to
at
be.
least 5.
I'm not going to be here either Saturday.
You're not
and
gonna be here either.
The manager's aware of that. I'm not submitting any questions. I'm basing my decision upon the resumes that were submitted, because I won't have time to review it before Monday night's meeting.
Okay.
And Mayor, may I suggest we could say, all right, we're going to have, just pick a number, 15 questions. You know what I mean? I'm just saying pick a number and saying that you have 50 minutes and let the candidates know up front that there are going to be 15 questions and let them allocate the appropriate time.
They
That's
know how
just
much
what's-
time they have. The more questions, I'll make a standard statement that I'll make to each one of them in the beginning, like I've done in the past, and just say, keep your answers succinct to the thing so we can get through more of the questions. We just keep going.
Yeah, really.
Well, that's true.
I think they need a time limit.
I'll say it in small words. But anyway, because I can't understand when they write to me, but anyway, we'll just keep round robbing it until we run out of time. When time's up, we're done. We keep it straight. So, like I say, submit 5 or so. Probably should be enough. But without Nabik here, it'll be faster.
Yeah, with neither one of us. Yeah.
Well, you're one less guy to ask questions, what I'm getting at. Okay, there being nothing else, did you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if we could get a update on the pickup for the hurricane debris. I've got people texting or not texting, but
You
calling me
mean
and.
where we're at today? Did you read?
Yeah, my district's picked up, but unfortunately, I've got people from somebody else's
Did
district.
you read
calling
that
me.
they stole everybody's equipment?
I did.
You did.
So,
Okay,
so we need to kind of give
today
an
was
update
kind of
because
a-
I don't know what to tell people.
Well, the word is patience, is that the debris is getting picked up. It's not getting picked up as fast as we all would like. It's not going to get picked up overnight.
I think
All right.
that's good.
But they are out there, and all right, they are out there. Whether you see them or not, they are out there, and it is 7 days a week. All right,
I drive
and they
around.
are in Commissioner Hanukkah's and Commissioner
Every day.
Hertzberg's area. All right, and we had agreed that we would finish one district before we move on to another district. There might be a little overlap. I mean, if we have between 1 and 3, just right on the border or whatever.
All right, but basically, we're getting there. Some cities are less than 20%. The county, what did they say, 1.3 million cubic yards they've picked up already? Volusia County?
There's been a lot of storm debris that has been
I
picked up.
talked to FDOT people this afternoon after I left that meeting. I had a meeting with a couple FDOT people. FDOT's got the same problem. Mostly in cities that aren't affected with state roads, because we don't have many state roads here. Most of ours are county. But like in DeLand and areas like that, they're doing one pickup. They're not going back for a second. And these farmers that live on some of the state roads were hauling stuff to the road. Now they're hauling more, and there's a big argument. And the FDOT said, that's on you. The city either picks it up or the county picks it up. We are not. The state's not making two passes. So,
Well, who's responsible to pick up the leftover wire? Because last Monday, the bucket truck tore down the wires on Howland.
they're going to come back and get that.
Okay.
I already heard somebody. That's a temporary thing.
That's nice.
They're going to pick all that up, but that's recyclable. So they got another firm that picks all that up. There's a lot of it laying around, especially.
I know they've got
out
that
toward
great big
Daytona.
pile of wire that they've got out there.
Yeah, Dunkin' Donuts and that. Yeah, they'll pick that up.
Yeah, that's really bad. Okay.
All right.
Well,
thank you all. If nothing being nothing further, we're adjourned.
All right.
Yeah, good night. Don't forget your